Good evening.
Hi, David.
Good evening,
You're
everybody.
live.
We're live.
Oh,
Today, I'm going to talk about something that will disturb a lot of people in the world of sacred geometry. And I wrote this book in paper and study I did, almost 2 decades ago on what are called differentials. And differentials challenges the symmetry and supersymmetry theories in physics. And it says, differential says that everything is uneven, nothing is even sided, and the universe is not symmetrical. And you can see this very simply. Like if I hold up this crystal, right, and this, even though these crystals are cut and polished, they cut the lines where they naturally grew, and you can see each side length is not the same measurement, right? It's different. So nature doesn't make even-sided perfect geometry. So when you see, sacred geometries of tetrahedrons and flower of lives, and everything is perfectly even, go pick up a flower and get your ruler out and measure in millimeters the radius, which is the center of the circle of the flower, and measure all your flower petals, and they're all different measurements, which means the center of the circle, the flower, the radius, there's an average. You can calculate an average, but there is no symmetrical perfect geometry anywhere in the creation. And that means the tinier building blocks that build that structure don't amount to symmetry either. And there's a reason for this. I'm going to demonstrate what the reason is. And so the reason is if your geometries are perfectly even-sided, and I see this in the world of sacred geometry, I see all these man-made structures that we like to look at, from tetrahedrons to cubes to hexagons to pentagons and in three-dimensional form and two-dimensional forms, and they all look so perfect. But why is it, again, when you look at natural geometries, they're all asymmetrical? And that's because of what are known as differentials. And the word difference actually is what voltage means. So in order to get current to flow, it's kind of like if you have no difference and your river is perfectly flat, well, you got a pond. But the second I create a difference from my left to right side, the water starts flowing and it's not a pond anymore, it's a creek. And on a hot sunny day, not a cloud in the sky, there's no wind. And as soon as I have a cloud that cools the patch of air underneath the cloud, you create a difference. And then the wind starts blowing, right? Because all the charged particles, the ions, or electrons in the air start moving. And so in order for energy to move, you need difference. And so when we're working with frequencies, it's the same thing. If I vibrate myself with a single healing frequency, like everybody loves 432, the vibrations will occur and the ripples will go out, but I can't move energy from point A to point B. So if I connect all of my chakras, like, with wire cables to each other, I can't get energy to move from one chakra to the next, to the next, to the next, unless I create a difference. And in a way, our music scale is like difference, right? A, B, C, D, F, G, and your flats and sharps. When music moves from, in arrangements, in patterns across the music scale, energy moves all over the place. And that's why you can have all these feelings in your body, because the human musical instrument will respond to it. So if you look at this, I'm going to do share screen here for a second.
go
I'm going
ahead.
to share my sound of the. Okay, this is an experiment we did so many years ago, probably 15 years ago, and it was my idea. But we used the Masaru Emoto effect, which is instantaneously cryogenically freezing water after it's exposed to a vibration. And on the left, we saw tap water that was instantly frozen, and this is what it looked like coming right out of the tap. And the same water, after it's exposed to the sound of the sun, instantly frozen is the image on the right. Right? So what you're seeing is a miraculous transformation of what actually happens when you understand that your body is made of about 87% water. And if you drink water out of the tap, then on the left-hand side is what the structure of the water in your body is going to look like. And the image on the right is after applying the harmony of the recording of our sun to the water. And of course, when you restructure your water internally, you have a different experience of order versus chaos, right? And it's the same thing if I were a musician and people, how many people can say they like music? Well, almost everybody will raise their hand. But what you don't know necessarily, you might know this, is if the musician didn't tune his instrument before they played their music, your water in your body would look like the mess on the left. It would be a chaotic mess. But when the recording artist tunes their instrument properly, guitar, piano, violin, drums, all of it, it'll look more like it does on the right. And that's the difference between using frequencies that are harmonies in your life and not doing anything at all. Just drinking water out of the bottle, out of the tap, living your life and not knowing that vibration and harmony is more profound and has a greater ability to transform how you feel than anything there is. In fact, music demonstrably can affect how you feel tremendously, before and after listening to some music that you actually like, or suiting the mood that you're actually in. So, but what probably you don't notice right away. Let me see if I can zoom in on my water crystal here. And you'll see that the radius, so if I measure from the center of my circle to the tip of each point, this crystal here is longer radius than this one here. And this one here is shorter than this one down here. And those are called differences in differential geometries. This is what a real, even though the basic structure is hexagonal because it has 6 points, so it's the hexagram, but there are many nuances. Actually, in the center, there's this diamond faceted sphere, which you can see in a much higher quality image of this. And you can see all these filaments on the inside of the crystals. In fact, I've never really seen a crystal like this in the Masaru Emoto effect. So we're not using emotion. We're playing the sound of our sun recorded by NASA to the water before and after. But notice the differential radiuses in the structure. Nothing is symmetrical. And these different points. So in the structure, nothing is symmetrical. And these different points. I'm getting a playback, Shiroz. Is symmetrical.
It's not here. It's weird.
What's up? Suddenly there's a parallel universe overlapping our universe, and I can hear myself talking from a little while ago.
It's not from us, David.
Oh, somebody needs to mute
Can
this.
everyone please mute themselves?
Yeah, somebody must be in the room and their mic is on. It's their mic. Just mute. So what this means is that, and I discovered what actually causes this to occur. And what causes it to occur is, you can use a frequency tone generator, and you can put in any of your favorite frequencies in there. If you press one frequency, there'll be no pulse. You won't hear a pulse. So let's actually hear what the sun sounds like. So I'm gonna play that first. I just have to go to my Google Drive and find it, and you can hear the Just gonna. Okay, so I got to do share audio now. Where do I do the share audio part on this, Charles? Do you know where that is? I don't see share audio. So we go to, tell me if you can hear this. Can you hear anything? Now I can't hear Sharoz. So tell me if anybody, you can hear that. Stop share. Okay, so when I play the sound of our sun, and many people who use my devices have used it in healing, you hear this pulse. It's kind of like a long human heartbeat. and in order to, so nobody can hear that. So that's really weird. I'm gonna go to settings and I go to audio. I go headphones is the audio, Zoom audio device virtual. Now if I do that, then I won't be able to hear anything. So I've had problems with this today. I did another show earlier today and I finally got it to work. Normally you can share when you present, you have a share option to share audio, but it's not coming up. Choose what to share.
David, it's in your audio settings. So when you have your settings, you go to settings and then you want to say audio and then be able to share audio.
Yeah, it says, there's so many iMac speakers, Zoom device, virtual. Let me try that. So can you hear that little
Nope.
audio test? So I can't hear you guys anymore. So let's see when I present. Share screen, share, and then I'm going to go to Google Drive and play the sound of the sun.
So it should be 3 dots and you should be able to share audio. It's 3 dots somewhere.
And then I'm going to stop. And then I'm going to stop. So were you able to hear that?
No.
External. Were you able to hear that?
Nope.
You heard nothing?
Nope.
Well,
Does anybody else?
I selected in my audio, I selected Zoom audio device virtual. So anyway,
It isn't in share headphones, Mike. I wish it was. It's in StreamYard.
No, we're in StreamYard, but StreamYard doesn't seem to have.
So when you click on present, you'll have options show up, and share. You're going to click share screen, and when you click on share screen, you'll have to say.
No, there's no option for a video there.
No, just listen to me. When you click on it, it'll say screen sharing tips. And then there's an audio icon and it says some screens let you share audio. Look for the share audio checkbox on the next window. So that comes up when you first go to share. So does it come up for you?
No. You see that? There's no audio here at all.
It's a window that comes up before you actually can share. Just before you hit share.
No, I know. It's not coming up. But the point, I just have to illustrate the point. The point is that if I use a single point frequency, there's no pulse. But if I use 3 differential frequencies, which I calculate in nature, and I play them all together, I'll create a pulse, which is like a heartbeat, which is what our sun is doing. So for the people who have actually heard the sound of the sun before, it creates a strobing pulse like it's breathing. It's rising and falling. And I did this, because if you look at Peter Lemizure's work on the Great Pyramid Decoded, all 4 sides of the base of the pyramid are different lengths. They're very subtle, very small differences. But if I enter all of those numerically in a tone generator, you see, ratio and proportion always remains the same. If I'm calculating a wavelength into a frequency based on a measurement, or I use the measurements as a frequency, their ratios will always be the same. So they'll do the same thing. Yeah, I did, Mike, I did do share headphones, by the way. So it's very strange because I'm using my headphones. Let me try one more time. Present, share screen.
So when you click present, there should be before you hit share, there should be a button that shows up for audio with a checkbox.
It says choose what to share. Entire screen, right. Window.
And then it says audio.
Even if I collect window, there's no audio.
No, you're gonna click on the last one, share screen, and then another window comes up, and there should be a checkbox that says share audio.
No, as soon as I click share, it just shares, and there is no opportunity. It's very strange. So stop share, go to settings, go to audio.
It's not in settings.
In my settings, my speaker is external headphones. But if I take my microphone to be Zoom audio device virtual,
we're not in Windows, so Media Player doesn't help us, Mike. Christina has a good answer. Just hum it for us. Do you have 3 dots above your window in your share screen when you do it?
microphone and headphones. Testing. There, can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, so I couldn't even hear myself switching all those up.
Yeah, I know.
So basically, because of these computer problems, it's a limitation in the broadcasting, software. The sun is making this pulse, and again, if using a single point frequency in a way is like an even-sided geometry, and a single point frequency will generate what appears to be an even-sided geometry. But as soon as you have differential, you create a pulse. It's breathing. And when you start to experience the pulse and you listen to the sound of the sun, you'll realize that the human heartbeat, even the rising and the falling of the human breath, is all part of a differentially.
David, why don't you put the link in the chat?
Oh, no. Yeah, but then they're all going to end up playing it at different times, and I've already got rid of it. Okay, so, because the people who have my devices know this, because if you listen to the sound of the sun, in fact, when NASA recorded the sound of the sun, it's not audible because the wavelengths are too long, and when wavelengths get too big, the frequency drops below audible hearing. So what they did is they basically sped the file up into the human audible range. So it's the same data, it's just happening a little bit faster so you can hear it. So I actually slowed it back down again, and you get this really long, barely audible pulse. And actually, in deep meditation, when I was in this meditation retreat over 30 years ago, I walked outside and I swear I could hear the sound of the sun. And people made fun of me thinking I was hallucinating. And then years later, there was an article in a scientific journal that scientists were astounded that our sun was making this sound. And the sound is probably part of the secret to its nuclear fusion and how it's producing fusion energy. We tend to only think of the photoelectric, and the photosynthetic part of, how we synthesize sunlight into living life form tissue, and plants and humans. We all respond to the sun. We sleep at night when there's no sun, and when the sun comes up, we wake up. So, because we're photosynthesized, we're receiving energy from the sun, and we wake up, and the plants wake up, and this whole cycle begins. But the point is, if geometry were symmetrical, there would be no pulse. And again, you can enter 3 numbers in a tone generator that are all different. It doesn't even, as long as they're in the audible range. So try around 60, enter 60, 61.2, 61.3, and 61.5. Just try it, and you'll see what happens. It'll form a pulse. And now, if you only enter 61.5 as one frequency, there's no pulse. So the pulse of life, which is everywhere, it's I actually have a recording. Let me try another recording I have in the actual Google. No, that I already did. The one I did before was in my Google Drive, and you just couldn't hear it. I can't get it to play because I have another one with 3 numbers at a much higher octave, and it sounds exactly like crickets, the way crickets sing at night. They there's a high pitch, but they shimmer. It's a pulse. You can hear the underlying pulse in crickets singing. It's going whoa, 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 but it's really high pitch, and that's because they're tuned into the same differential vibrations that are permeating throughout the universe that are the cause of the underlying pulse of life. So what this means is, with frequency healing, we need differential frequencies to create a pulse that mimics, the human heartbeat, the breath, and the underlying cosmic pulse of life that is virtually everywhere, right? Oh, somebody's microphone is on. I hear some noises. So this is why, like, I beg you to go into nature, and you can pick up anything. Like, these are acorns, right? They're all slightly different. What's that sound, Charles? Somebody's
What's the sound you're hearing?
Somebody's, I don't know, making big noises. So everywhere you pick up a geometry in nature, you're going to see this differential. And the differential and the pulse coming from our sun is all animating this giant orchestra, this giant symphony of creating all these different shapes and sizes and oblong forms and blobs, and some things that kind of come into perfection, and they can look symmetrical. But when you see a non-symmetrical, in other words, pick up any flower and then you measure the petals of the flower, and you'll see they're all different radiuses, just like I showed you with the sound of the sun crystal. And imagine that there's so many actual frequencies at play. Sometimes there's 2, sometimes there's 3, sometimes there's 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And that's when you get into something which is much more advanced, which are called they're polygon, what are called polygonal numbers. You can Google that on Google. Polygonal numbers are numbers that build the polygons, as in a triangle. It's the first polygon, actually, is the triangle, and then the square, which is 3-dimensionally the cube, and then the pentagon, the 5-sided, the hexagon, the septagon, and so forth. So the numbers that build the polygons are differential sets of numbers, right? And so that's what I'm talking about today, is that when we make art and the geometries are, everything is perfect, just looks so perfect. That geometry, what happens in a differential geometry is it has an inflow and an outflow. The difference is allow energy to come in and exit the form, which means it's breathing. And that's why when you add these three numbers together, so just go into any tone generating software. I use Black Hat Systems Audio Toolbox, and I've got 12 tracks, and enter 61, 61.25, and 61.5, just three numbers. And you watch what it does. It'll rise and fall, rise and fall. And so there so then the idea is to understand that with the pulse of life, the pulse of the sound of the sun, which I wanted you to hear, and the pulse in your own chest, your heartbeat, are not single point frequencies. What's generating the human heartbeat is a series of differential, everything is numbers. I can create the most amazing sounds and duplicate them in nature, all with numbers in a tone generating system, which means everything is built on differential frequencies as numbers. But if I only use one number, like 432, I'll create waves on the pond, but the energy won't move. It won't move. But as soon as I could add 432 and 432.25 and 432.5. So try entering those three numbers on a tone generator and watch what happens. You're going to see the shimmering, because 432 is a much higher frequency than the 61 number that I gave you. And it'll do the same thing, but you'll see the shimmering get faster. And if I go to 3000, the 3000 scale, and I do three differential numbers, it'll sound like crickets, right? So, and then when you see birds and you hear a bird sing, they don't sing one frequency. I mean, in fact, I can check this using my frequency meter on my phone. So I use frequency meter. You see, and it just jumps around. All the numbers jump around because it's hearing all these sounds. It's hearing my kids in the background. And when you do that with a bird, it's not one frequency. The bird isn't singing one frequency. There's a pulse in there. And those pulses are built on differential numbers. Like I said, there might be three, because the first polygon is 3, triangle, and then 4, then 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14. You can get very, very complex differential patterns. And what this means is all of our sacred geometry art, in a way, it's beautiful, but it's wrong, because the energy won't flow in and out of a system like that. But when I show you an image of the sound of our sun, like I did, you'll see that each radius of each of the hexagonal spokes has a different number value as the radius, whether you use fractions of an inch or millimeters or whatever you want to use, even right down to micrometers, So you see that if you measured the spokes on the sound of the sun, because it's an actual water crystal that was formed in the sound of the sun, I can measure it in millimeters, or I can go down to even fractions of a millimeter, and if I enter that numerically as a value in a tone generator, the difference, the ratio, the proportion of each radius to each other, so I'll enter 6 numbers, will produce a sound. And remarkably, it's going to pulse like our sun does in actuality.
David, there's no questions here. Do you want to answer them? Why do you consider the vibration of two waves as a pulse? Both waves are pulsing. By definition,
No, because
pulse.
They're both waves are pulsing, but they're not when two frequencies come together, they resonate against each other and they form myriad other reactive frequencies. They don't stand alone. There's a reaction, and every reactions and reactions and reactions produces fractals, and each fractal is another frequency. So you can experience this. It's one theory about binaural audio beats is if I put 2 hertz in this ear and 1 hertz in this ear, but of course that's not audible, 100 in this ear and say 110 in this ear, the difference is 10 hertz. But that's not what actually happens, because on a frequency meter, if I run 10 and 20 hertz together, my frequency meter doesn't report 10 hertz as the difference, right? It doesn't. Difference doesn't work that way, because they vibrate against each other and produce a whole bunch of myriad, and then they're out of phase with each other, and that's what creates the pulse. So yeah, both waves are pulsing, but then they interact, right? So it doesn't. In a way, a frequency can't exist on its own. Everything feeds into everything. But I'm talking about the frequency. See, a frequency and the structure of the wave creates the geometry, because you can see that in cymatics, even though cymatics is more like art, because what the plate is made out of, whether it's steel or aluminum or tungsten or copper, you're going to get a different result. The shape of the plate, the dimensions of the plate. Is it a round plate? Is it a rectangle? Is it a square? All of that has to do with the geometry. That's why, to me, cymatics, it's not really science, it's art. And it's beautiful art in the sense that it demonstrates that vibration creates a liquid phase geometry that can become a solid state geometry. This is a solid state. This crystal is in a solid state. But then I can turn it back into a liquid state just by melting it down. Yeah. FM is frequency modulation. AM is amplitude modulation. That's radio. You're getting into how you pulse modulate the data, which is the music or the person's voice or the news on the wave. So, and then you need, on the other end, you need to take the modulation out of the carrier wave. But that's a different thing, because you can use the frequency as a carrier wave, and then you can pulse modulate the wave on the frequency or the amplitude. AM is amplitude modulation, FM is frequency modulation. Radio, right? And then nowadays, digital radio is something else, because we generally nowadays radio isn't anything like the way it used to be. I mean, there are old radio stations that still work, and they still send out frequency modulated data on that you can tune into in your car, but it's all changed because the wavelengths have gotten so much smaller, the antenna is so much smaller, and the frequency is so much higher. Yeah, so I gave a presentation on Rex earlier today. Kenneth was noting that I really went into greater details in that presentation, but I wasn't able to show the picture of the water crystal. So when you're looking at geometries and you're looking at all of your polygonal numbers, you'll start to see what's really the secret behind the creation of form, right? It's not one frequency at a time. That you can do that in cymatics, because there's no such thing as one frequency. So if I induce a sound onto a metal plate, the metal plate, responds sympathetically to the vibration I'm putting into it, and it makes its own sound, right? Like, it's like a tuning fork, right? So I can induce sound on this, or I can hit it, and it will vibrate in response to the vibration that I put upon it. So if I hit it, this is a vibration, but it's going to ring back at a different frequency than I hit it with, right? So that means that there's a reaction set of frequencies in addition to the initial strike frequency. And those are your fractals. I mean, they bounce into everything. Every material, from aluminum to copper to zinc to everything, sounds different too. Like if I ring this copper rod versus an aluminum rod, they don't sound the same at all. And I can measure an aluminum rod the same length and the same thickness as the copper and an iron rod. They don't sound the same. They have a completely different quality. And that's where frequency gets much more complex, because, why is it with violin strings, there's nothing that compares to horsehair? Why? Why? You have synthetic violin strings, but they won't compare. There's something about, that's the quality of the material, and the material is vibrating. So that's why in cymatics, when I look at cymatics, I say, what's the plate matter? What's the dimensions? How thick is the plate? What would it look like if I used a wooden plate versus an aluminum plate, plus a steel plate, a copper plate, a solid gold plate? It's all going to be different. And the size of the plate, because when you vibrate a plate, the wave goes out, it hits the end of the plate, then it comes back in, and then it goes back out, and it's doing this incredibly fast. So I have the sympathetic response, and then I have the initial input frequency, right? And it's probably the same with water. There are probably different types of water, depending what the mineral content of the water is. It's not all going to respond exactly the same, right? And the water in your body where you live will have different minerals in it than the water where I live, so some of the differences are really subtle, but that's, again, cymatics is profound science and art. It's kind of like a fusion of science and art, but it's very difficult to quantify it, to say that this frequency produces this geometry. You can't say this frequency produces this geometry, because you're inducing the frequency on a material, and all the materials are different. Aluminum is a much warmer, softer sound than steel, and I like aluminum. I like the way it vibrates. It has a real warmth to it. But again, there are different metals on the periodic table that are going to sound completely different, including if, I tried making crystal bars out of selenite, and it doesn't vibrate for very long, right? And the speed of sound, you can actually Google this. The speed of sound in different metals is completely different. It doesn't travel at the same speed through iron as it does through aluminum, as it does through gold. In fact, beryllium is the fastest metal. The speed of sound will go faster through beryllium than any metal there is. So the speed of sound through the earth, of course, is much faster than it is through the air, right? At sea level, it's like just under 800 miles per second, right? So it's, or not per second, per hour. So yeah, per hour, not per second. But so when you say if something's tuned to 432 hertz, like middle A, instead of 440, if I vibrate aluminum at 432 hertz, and copper and zinc and lead and gold and steel, they can all vibrate. Not easy to do it, because you can't cut your bars at the same length, because the speed of sound in each metal is different. They're not the same. So you're to tune a bar made of a different metal at the same. So I tune all my bars to 432 hertz. They're not going to sound the same. So that means the geometries that reactively are created in the presence of that frequency are going to be different, and that's because of the material they're made out of. So that's why, again, cymatics it's a mixture of art and science, but it's not quantifiable. It probably is if you know the velocity of sound and the particular material you're using, and the size of the plate, the dimensions and the thickness, and you get a really good physicist to do all these calculations. It's probably quantifiable. They can tell you what are the shapes that you're going to see, in the water pool on top of that metal, and of course some people use oil, and it's very beautiful because it demonstrates that geometry is born out of frequency, and that's a very beautiful thing. So what I'm saying is differential geometry is is real geometry. You'll see there's an endpoint for the energy to come into the geometry and an exit point so that it can breathe. But when we make geometries that are perfectly even, and some natural geometries, it's hard to see the difference, but it's there. It's hard to see it. And in other ones, like what I showed you, the sound of the sun and the water crystal, very easy to see with the naked eye the difference. But it's always there. And the question is, if I make a wall and out of bricks, and every brick is measured with a laser, and they're all exactly the same, and I stack them all together, then the final geometry is going to be even-sided. But if my building blocks are all slightly different little lengths, and I put them all together, the bigger it gets, the more lopsided what I'm making is going to appear. And that's why when we look at flowers and natural geometries, they're all different, because the tiny building blocks, the little vibrations that are making them, have these differentials built into them. So when physicists are arguing symmetry versus asymmetry, I laugh and I say, you guys I can't believe you can't figure this out, that the universe is not symmetrical. But they want it to be symmetrical, because Newton said every action has an equal and opposite reaction, and it doesn't. The reaction is not equal and opposite. It eventually, each reaction gets weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker and weaker, and fractals into tinier and tinier and tinier and tinier reverberations. So you don't have symmetry. Again, it's a great argument in physics, because in the end, even if I calculate all my differences against each other, do I have symmetry in the end? I mean, I've seen physicists argue this on both sides. Really good physicists from major universities. I read an incredible book. I wish I could remember his name. This particular physicist was arguing against symmetry and leaning on the side of asymmetry, which is where I would lean. But maybe somehow in the very end, it all balances out. So anyway, that's the talk for today. It's all about understanding differentials and using frequencies in sets to create the pulse rather than a single point frequency. That's my little Astoria. So that means she's telling me I got to go.
David, before you go, can you just off-topic question? Can you talk about the subject of gauze and a Rife device versus your device, and why somebody would choose your frequency over Rife?
Well, see, Rife's frequencies are destructive frequencies to certain pathogens that he saw under his 30,000 time microscope. And those are beneficial to be destructive. And I can tell you, there are certain frequencies that each metal doesn't like. And I've experienced this. I can listen to headphones that are titanium, iron-based magnets versus neodymium magnets, and certain frequencies will irritate one set of headphones and not the other. You see, so basically, Rife frequencies are very similar in that he found the frequencies that irritated the virus. But that doesn't mean you want to keep doing those frequencies all the time, because they're destructive. They're designed to irritate something and destroy it. My frequencies are all about bringing harmony and balance and energy shifts and taking people into higher and higher states of consciousness. And in higher states of consciousness is ultimately where healing actually occurs. I mean, when people think of Jesus and all the healings he did, he does it because he's in this higher state of consciousness. And when he touches a person, then there's a transference of energy to that person, which is a different approach than using a deconstructive frequency, meaning it destroys or irritates it, right? So that means, in my opinion, I mean, my frequency library is so huge, it would take you 5 years to go through all of my frequencies and do them properly, right?
Agreed.
And Rife's library of frequencies is available to the world. Nobody owns it anymore because it's past the 40-year limit on copyright.
And anyways, your device, you can run whatever frequency you want, whether it's
I can run
yours,
through
right?
my coil systems, my coils, my wands, my beds, my cubes. I can run 0.5 hertz and detect it coming out of these coils. So it'll transmit. Most speakers start at about 37 hertz at the bottom, and the human brain starts at half a hertz, even less than that, in the delta state, and it goes up from there, right? Because in theta, you're going to approach, you're just under 8 hertz, and alpha, 8 hertz ish, and then your beta and your gamma waves. So most speakers are not starting really until upper beta, right on the brain, whereas my coils start at the bottom of the brain. So I can train the brain waves and harmonize the brain waves with my systems, but you can't do that with sound. And sound healing can't do that because even good headphones will not put out that low. In fact, the best speakers I've seen that can arguably put out 12 or 13 hertz, which is still not as low as these go, so it won't cover the lowest part of the brain, they're over $150,000 a pair, right? And so the beauty of these coils is I can transmit 432 megahertz, 432 million hertz, is way beyond human hearing. And my daughter has gotten all the frequencies, which you can see. Okay, so thanks everybody for being here. You can send questions in actually through to Sharose, and we can go deeper into them. But I've got to run because I think she's hungry. Okay.
Okay, good. Thank you. Yeah, feel free to send me your questions. Just send them to my phone number. I'll try and answer them. Bye, everyone. Have a great night.